And Senator, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go back to where I started and talk about this, in Chicago, what's happening in Illinois. And, you know, yesterday was a pretty nice day, and around the country, it was very difficult to keep people inside, obviously, because it was probably the first nice day in a while, non-rainy. And here is what the Chicago mayor had to say, warning Chicagoans after yet another house party took place. Take a listen.
We're not playing games. We mean business, and we are going to shut this down one way or the other. The time for educating people into compliance is over. Don't be stupid. We will shut you down. We will cite you. And if we need to, we will arrest you, and we will take you to jail.
You know, and this reminds me, Senator, of the all of the viral video clips of Italian mayors doing the exact same thing, going on air and doing these clips where they were basically threatening people and saying, listen, don't be stupid. You don't want to, you know, go get your nails done and look beautiful in a casket. So we're at that phase now. What do you make of the status of where we've reached? I mean, we've already surpassed the number of dead in Vietnam. So we're not in a good place.
We're not in a good place, and we're not out of the tunnel just yet. What we need are more test kits. We need more widespread and free testing for everyone who needs a test or who wants a test, and we don't have that yet. Until we have that, we can't fully reopen the economy. I fully support Mayor Lightfoot and Governor Pritzker. They're doing a fantastic and tough job. You know, as a mom of a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I have my 79-year-old mom living with me, I'm glad that these orders are in place because I happen to live with some of the most vulnerable population, just like so many other families out there. And I don't want my children and my mother exposed to this deadly virus. And you shouldn't want your family members exposed to it either.
Yeah, absolutely. What about I want to talk a little bit about the actions of the administration here. There's been, I mean, obviously nothing but criticism because clearly it's not been a success, as Jared Kushner tried to claim. It's been the opposite of that. But we've now had this administration, this president, replace the watchdog, the IG, who identified the critical medical shortages that we face. Here's a little bit of a story on that. It says the White House waited until after business hours. This is a New York Times piece, to announce the nomination of a new inspector general for the department who, if confirmed, would take over for Christy A. Grimm, the principal deputy inspector general who was publicly assailed by the president at a news briefing 3 weeks ago. Trump is blaming the people who are telling the public about the shortages rather than fixing the shortages. What do you make of the firing of this inspector general, and will there be potentially hearings on it? Well,
unfortunately, it's a sad firing in a long line of firings of people who are doing their jobs and trying to protect and serve the American people that President Trump has carried out. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. You know, this is, after all, an administration and a president who, when he found out and was warned about this pandemic, this crisis looming back in January and February, spent his time pandering and basically sucking up to the communist head of an authoritarian regime in President Xi of China. You know, he was flattering the man instead of preparing our country for this pandemic. And if those protesters that are out there want to protest something, protest the Trump administration's failure to provide test kits all across this country, protest the Trump administration's failure to seize control of PPE supply chain early on 3 months ago when they should have done this. You know, if they want to protest something, protest this failure of a president who's not done his job and continues to put politics in front of the health and well-being of hardworking, everyday Americans all across the country. Shame on him.
Yeah. Indeed. And I want to talk, I'm going to get to talking about some of these other, these events going on. I hesitate to call them protests because they seem to be sort of AstroTurf related. But before I get to that, I do want to take advantage of the fact that I have with me not just a United States Senator, but a military veteran, a war hero yourself, Senator. And what do you make of, I want to ask you about a couple of issues. One of them is bringing back these Army cadets to campus for graduation. There's been a lot of criticism of it. I'll tell you what the Army has said about defending bringing these cadets back to West Point. And we have to bring the cadets back to West Point to begin the process of the physicals they need to take, of all the clearance procedures to clear barracks, to get their personal items. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy told reporters during a Pentagon news briefing, pressed on why West Point couldn't hold a virtual ceremony. Army Chief of Staff General James McConville replied, "We can't telecommute to combat." Your thoughts on bringing those cadets back for graduation?
Well, I don't disagree with Secretary McCarthy that the cadets need to clear their barracks and get their physicals and get all of that in order. What I disagree with is the decision to put 1,000 cadets into a single space for a prolonged period of time while President Trump just talks at them. You could bring these cadets back in a graduated series, one small group at a time to get this done so that they can then report to their next duty station and be the frontline leaders of our Army that they're supposed to be. But to take all 1,000 of them, bring them back all at once, and then put them into a confined area in a single space so the president could just talk at them, that's the poor decision making that's happening right now. And as for telecommuting to combat, come on, this is talking about putting people into a graduation ceremony. Graduation ceremonies are not combat. I don't think any one of those cadets would hesitate to run into combat, to lead troops into battle. But now you're just needlessly exposing them to the dangers. And by the way, that's going to affect military readiness, because if any one of those cadets gets sick, then what happens to them? Well, it's going to delay them reporting out to the units, out to the Army as a whole. And if some of them get sick enough that they have to be medically discharged, now you've lost all that investment we made as taxpayers in their education for 4 years, and they don't even get to start the careers that they worked so hard for. Let's make some good decisions here. And President Trump just shows why he is a failure as a commander-in-chief, why he's not someone who should be leading our troops in any way, shape, or form. If he thinks that him talking at them and putting them into a single space so that he can just stroke his own ego is the height of narcissism, but it is not good leadership.
You think he's doing it just for a photo op?
Of course he is. Isn't that what Trump does all the time? He puts, as that leaked memo says, they put politics in front of everything else. He's willing to put politics and his own personal ego in front of getting these 1,000 young second lieutenants out into the troops to lead the force. That's what we should be focused on. Let's make sure we get these guys out there so that they can show up at their next duty station and do the jobs that they've trained so hard to do. These are amazing, outstanding young men and women. They deserve better than to be needlessly exposed to a pandemic.
Let me ask you about these we'll call them protesters, these AstroTurf armed protests. You've had some, we showed earlier a photo of one in which a Nazi slogan was used, but just the armed men, mostly men, mostly white, showing up at these, inside even the Michigan State Capitol. This isn't what a protest normally looks like. This looks like an attempt to intimidate. What do you make of this as a military veteran? What do you make of that? Donald Trump has praised them. He tweeted yesterday, the governor of Michigan should give a little put out the fire, see them, talk to them. He says they're angry. They want their lives back. They're good people. It sounds like the very fine people thing that he said about Charlottesville. It's what it sort of sounded like to a lot of people. What do you make of these, whatever you want to call them, armed gatherings?
Yeah, they're out there. They're out here to intimidate. And by the way, that Nazi slogan is not acceptable. We just ended Asian American Awareness Month this past month, and it was actually the members of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, 100th Battalion, that liberated Dachau, the Japanese American, who continue to fight and defend this great nation, even as we put their own family members into camps back here on American soil. So for me, as an Asian American, that really, it just strikes at my heart. And as a soldier, it strikes at my heart. That's not American. You want to be American? Stand up and look out for your neighbors. You want to be American? Stand out and do the tough thing. And a tough thing is to, let's just take care of each other, respect law and order. Let's follow the scientists and keep people safe. And then together as a community, we can move forward. And this president, unfortunately, continues to divide us. He just panders to the most outrageous, most extreme, when what he should be doing is lending comfort and talking. What he could do? He could help us pass legislation to help working families. Let's pass universal family medical leave. Let's make sure that families who have to stay home, who can't get to work, are able to afford to do that. Let's help people who can't afford to pay their rent, and folks on Medicare and Medicaid and people with disabilities. He's not doing any of that. What kind of a president is this that tries to divide a nation in a crisis?
Are you concerned that these kinds of protests, whatever you want to call them, are attracting sort of militia-type activity? There has been increased, sort of threatening, language about Asian Americans. The API community is more vulnerable now. Are you concerned that this is going to attract something more than just what are being called protests.
Of course.
And that violence could ensue.
Exactly. And President Trump is pandering to the extreme right. He's pandering to his extreme base right now instead of leading the nation and uniting us as a country. This is why we need new leadership in Washington. You know, we need someone in the White House who's going to be empathetic, who's going to care about the American people, all of the American people, no matter what color or your background or how rich you are or how poor you are, or whether or not, you know, you live in Michigan or Florida or Hawaii or anywhere else. We are a united nation. You know, and we should move forward that way. And these guys out there, they're just trying to intimidate and divide us, and we can't let them do it.
I have to let you go. I am out of time, but I have to ask you, Senator, are you being vetted to your knowledge potentially by Vice President Joe Biden as he's picking his potential running mate?
Well, you'll have to ask him for that. I'm just thrilled that he is going to be our nominee, and you couldn't have a more empathetic individual lead the country than Joe Biden, and then also in the First Lady, Dr. Biden. I'm just thrilled to have my name mentioned in the same breath as a Kamala Harris or as an Amy Klobuchar, who's my personal hero.
Oh, okay. Well, Senator Tammy Duckworth, keep us posted. Please come back here first if you do think you're going to get the nod. Thank you so much, and be safe.
Thank you.
And coming